Hey everyone, this is SFL Live, our third episode now, and we're joined by four wonderful student activists who tell us a little bit about their opinions on current events and some of the activism they've been doing. So just to briefly talk about SFL a bit, Students for Liberty is an international nonprofit organization. It's dedicated to providing resources to college students across the globe to promote liberty on their campuses, to promote social liberty, economic freedom, and academic freedom. So to get right into the talks, I guess, I will introduce our guests, and I have their bios right here, if I can find them. Here we go. So first we have Benjamin Blow. He's a former SFL organizer from South Texas. He's a black anarchist, radical womanist, and an undergraduate studying anthropology in San Antonio. Some of his current interests and organizing efforts include combating racial violence, emancipatory technologies employed by marginalized identities, the I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing this, Ben. Rahovian.
Uh,
Sorry, if you want to unmute yourself and correct me.
Rojava.
Rajavan, sorry. Rajavan Social Revolution, a worker-owner cooperative. So we'll probably hear more a little bit about that towards the end of the show, too. We also have Taylor Savala, who is a political science student at Texas State University, where they work for their school's local radio station. They're dedicated to the removal of government coercion and are currently beating a fast food addiction, so we should all pray for Taylor. Katie Moyer is a senior at Millersville University in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. She's going to graduate in December and plans to work on a 2016 GOP presidential campaign. She is a senior campus coordinator with Students for Liberty, and her political interests include domestic issues, such as medical marijuana, the national debt, the Constitution, and reforming the Republican Party. And last but not least, we have Kelly V., who is a rising senior at Tulane University in New Orleans, and also an advisor at the Center for Stateless Society. She's an anarcho-feminist former Students for Liberty campus coordinator. So to jump right into the conversation, then the thing that seems to be on everyone's minds lately is the Charleston shooting. In case any of you have been living under a rock lately, basically this I think 19-year-old person, I forget his name, Dylan Roof, there it is. He shot and killed 9 people inside the historic Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church near the heart of Charleston's tourist district. And a lot of different conversations have been spiraling out of this here. There's a lot of clamoring for gun control. The conversations entwined here with a lot of the calls to remove Confederate flag and other symbols from the Confederacy from public buildings in the South because of some pictures of him with the Confederate flag that were found after the shooting. So I guess I'll just open it up for discussion on whatever angle you all want to take on this. Ben, do you want to maybe go ahead and tell us what you think about this whole Charleston shooting mess?
I mean, there are a lot of elements to it, right? It's undeniable, no matter how many people from the South and other maybe deny that this was race motivated. It's undeniable at this point that, Dylan wanted to start some sort of race war, even by his own words. The manifesto of his own website, which, certain U.S. networks have found exactly what was said in his manifesto and just what he hoped to aspire with this. And so I guess, it's a lot of feelings from a lot of people, black people of color. It's a time of mourning, a remembrance that the black life maybe isn't, as much as a lot of people want to say all lives matter, right? That black lives particularly matter. And so I don't know, the response is huge, right? People want gun control. There are people like me who are completely for black armament and protestations against the status quo, the view that a lot of people have here. But I can say more about that in a minute. I'd like anyone else to go.
Sure. Okay. Katie, do you want to give us your thoughts on this? Go ahead. And remember to unmute yourself.
Well, I think that the really interesting thing about this situation is that the people of Charleston are doing exactly the opposite of what he wanted to have happen. I see a lot of reports of people coming together, the forgiveness. I don't know if anybody else watched when the families were able to speak to the killer. Just the way that their faith really drove them in such a positive and beautiful way, I think, shows that even though this was an event that was supposed to, he said, like in his manifesto, that he wanted to spark a race war, but to see that it's doing the complete opposite, I think, is showing the resilience of Americans and of people from that area.
Definitely interesting. I haven't seen any of that, but I definitely think it's worth looking into. It's easy to draw a lot of negatives from this whole thing, but you want to keep look for a silver lining. Kelly, do you want to go ahead and tell us your thoughts on this whole thing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like Katie said, the response by the community has been really great. Charleston was struck by tragedy earlier this year when a black man was unarmed and murdered by police. In this case, the officer who killed, was it Walter Scott? I hope I'm getting his name. The officer that killed him they actually brought charges against him, which is extremely rare. And I think that's something we need to think about moving forward, is that this is a community who is constantly on the end of a gun, whether it be from law enforcement or from white supremacists. And to call for taking away their guns, their ability to defend themselves when they know that they can't count on the police, is just really, really disappointing and really stupid. So also we need to stop blaming on mental illness. I know a lot of people, every single time there's a white shooter who kills a bunch of people, the thing that people jump to is not ideology or anything like that. It's that they blame the shooter for having mental illness. And that kind of attitude really hurts the mentally ill, who are disproportionately non-violent. Most violent crime is committed by people who are perfectly sane. So I guess we need to stop blaming the mentally ill, and we need to stop blaming guns, because to ask the black army, or the black, ask the black community to disarm themselves and turn to the police instead for protection is incredibly ignorant. And I guess that's all I really have to say. So Taylor wants to go ahead.
Yeah, Taylor, go ahead.
Okay. Really quickly, I just wanted to clarify. He was 21. He wasn't 19. But I've just been reading basically anything that I can about this situation, and specifically Dylan and what reinforced his hate crime. But that's probably what I've taken the most out of this event, is the fact that it is a hate crime, and I'm trying to emphasize to a lot of my friends that hate crimes still exist and happen every single day. I think that a lot of people want to believe that we've progressed a lot as a society when it comes to hate crimes and racism, and I wouldn't completely agree with that. I think that we've definitely come far when it, kind of is compared to maybe the 1800s and, even before then. But I think right now we're in this weird stage of de-development, and I'm just really trying to reinforce and emphasize the fact that this was a hate crime. Hate crimes do exist still to this day, and that there's nothing okay with seeing this as anything else besides a crime full of hate and fueled by racist hate. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I guess the follow-up question then is that I want to ask you all is what kind of solution to this kind of thing? I mean, it seems like we're all on pretty much the same page about similar motivation. Definitely some sort of race-motivated hate crime. So, what kind of? I mean, does this actually call for any kind of widespread solution, or I mean, what do you think we can do to prevent stuff like this? We can go back to Ben. Ben.
Well, first, what Taylor left off on, historical context. I mean, that's essential. Trying to relate this to libertarianism particularly, the African American Methodist Church there was actually a symbol of Black rebellion. I mean, one of the founders themselves tried to enact a slave revolt back in the early 1800s, and actually got away with it almost for 10 days until a lot of the white supremacists in South Carolina hung him. His name was Denmark Vesey. But just that church as a symbol of Black, intolerance towards white terrorism or white supremacy, it's a symbol for that, and that should be a little bit stressed more. As for solutions, you get into the conversation of maybe nonviolence versus self-defense, but I think you know, again, it's still a time for mourning, but you know, kind of being out about your radicalism and coming and making things like networks like the Huey P. Newton Gun Club, black people arming themselves, people of color arming themselves. This is one solution that doesn't really enact so much government legislation or the state. That's my opinion.
Definitely. That's interesting about the church. I didn't know that. I definitely want to read more about that. Taylor writes in the chat, I love Ben. I also love Ben. I think we can all agree with that. Katie, what about you about regarding solutions to this kind of horrible tragedies?
I think I'm going to have to disagree just a little bit with what Kelly said in that I do think that this could possibly, like when I think about this situation, I do think that there's a possibility that there's some kind of a mental illness involved with this, but I would definitely agree in the way that I think mental illness should be something considered with all people who do crazy, horrific things like this. Regardless of their color. I agree in the media it's more portrayed as white people having a mental illness, some kind of like excuse per se. But I think that that's one area that I would definitely look into. For example, I know that they have I know with background checks they're trying to do more with trying to help people with mental illnesses not have firearms, which wouldn't change this situation because he got the gun as a gift, but I still think it's an area that I think is responsible to do. But I also think that I know South Carolina has fairly strict gun control laws, so I agree with Ben. I think that people should be able to arm themselves. They should feel comfortable and confident in arming themselves. If somebody in that room was able to carry on themselves, maybe the shooter wouldn't have been able to kill so many people. So I think encouraging self-protection is definitely a direction I would go.
Absolutely. Kelly, go ahead if you wanted to respond to Katie or tell us about solving these kinds of problems.
Yeah, I definitely want to respond to the mentally ill thing. The mentally ill are a very big group of people, and that term, mentally ill, is very, very broad. The problem is that in our society, people with mental illnesses are often stigmatized, regarded as violent, when in reality the mental illness contributing to violent crime, there may be a link there, but it is very, very, very small. And I want to actually, I'm going to post a link with some info about that in our chat, and then maybe someone can put that in the up for the Liberty Me people. So anyway, I don't think that disarming a huge group of people who are already a stigmatized group in the United States and maybe need to be able to defend themselves more than other people, I don't think that's a good solution.
But if someone is irrational or can't make good judgments, I think that that is a place where it's for the protection of other people. I think obviously mental illness is a very, very, it's like a really big, broad word, but I think that people who are like have very, very severe bipolar or some kind of, I don't know, medical, like a specific medical term, but I think that there are certain times where people should not be allowed. It doesn't mean that anything negative other than it's probably, you know, safer for them.
Again, I have to disagree. I mean, I think that there's always going to be a risk with guns no matter whose hands you put them in. But to try to deny, I don't know, shift the focus from race or from individual hatred or from, you know, this kind of cultural and historical background here and shift it towards mental illness, which is what always happens when there's a mass shooting, is just adds to the stigma of being mentally ill. And people who are mentally ill still own themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They are still people.
They're not just irrational beings, I think is what Kelly's trying to emphasize.
They still deserve to be able to defend themselves. I'm bipolar. I should be able to buy a gun.
Okay.
I think also a clarification on what Katie said is the gun that he was given on his 21st birthday was also, it hasn't been clarified whether or not that was the same gun that he used in the shooting, but he did pass a background check for purchasing another gun. But there hasn't been a clarification for which gun was actually used in the shooting.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
Well, I guess, Kelly, let's agree to disagree, because I think that there are definitely 100% circumstances where people should not be allowed because they are a harm to themselves or they're a harm to other people. So I guess we can just agree to disagree.
I guess we'll have to leave it at that for
All
now.
right,
but if you want to, Facebook message me later, we can talk about it.
Definitely a good way to end that segment, I think. Friendly disagreement, of course. I mean, the conversation goes on. Taylor, do you want to maybe have any last comments there? I know you commented there, but I wanted to get to you about the solutions thing.
Oh, I mean, first of all, I completely agree with Ben that, there's no, government law that can pass that can ban racism for existing, right? Like, this is completely an issue within the mindset of people in society thinking that this form of racism is okay or that any form of racism is okay. And, not just racism, but hate crimes, committing some horrible acts against somebody because you hate them for their gender, for their sexual orientation, for their race, anything that falls under that umbrella. But with solutions, I mean, I am not the kind of person that would be able to come up with a solution to this besides just emphasizing with any person I can, word of mouth, that, this is not an okay mindset to have when approaching life and that this is never something that should be considered acceptable. And I don't think that shaming individuals is the proper way to promote this kind of word of mouth, right? I don't think that shame is something that causes positive reinforcement, but at the same time, it's really difficult. It's like a double-edged sword, right? Because you want to shame an individual for feeling this way, feeling this kind of hate and this kind of reinforcement of this hate, but at the same time, you don't understand the factors behind why that person feels that way. I got in a huge argument with my uncle the other day. My entire family is incredibly liberal besides my uncle, who's this hardcore farmer. And the big issue is a disagreement between my cousin and I, because he doesn't think that it's acceptable for my uncle to think this way because that was the way that he was born. And I just was trying to say, look, we just shouldn't be having this argument over dinner because this isn't the time, nor is it the place, nor is this argument going to change the way that he feels. So, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of different factors when you're dealing with an issue like this, and I wish that I had a single-fold solution, I wish that there was something easier that I could do, but at this point in time, I feel like it just comes down to the individual reinforcing the fact that this isn't okay, it's not acceptable, and, working from there, honest to God.
Okay, sorry to do this really quick, but I forgot to mention that the state has often used mental illness as a way of suppressing political opposition in the past, and I'm worried about mental illness laws being able to be abused in that way again.
So we all are definitely skeptical of the government because we're all libertarians, but don't you think that there are places and points for involvement on that issue? I mean, you can use anything and it can turn into a slippery slope. And I know I have a history minor. I know about how the government has done that kind of stuff, blamed it on certain things. But do we at least acknowledge that there are people who are sick and ill and probably shouldn't be armed for their own safety or for our own?
I think that taking guns away from people based on a group categorization is too much of a risk. And arming more people in general is a good way of preventing that kind of violent attack. And I think we should probably move on because Corey's getting impatient.
Sorry.
One more thing, and then I'm just gonna stop talking about this regarding. But Katie, I think that you're confusing mental illness with sick and ill as a negative context.
I don't know what you mean by that.
So, like, first when you began the conversation, you were talking about mental illness, and then you're reinforcing the conversation about mental illness by saying words like sick, ill, and incapable of taking care of themselves.
Right.
And I think that you just need to clarify that those things aren't mutually exclusive.
No, that's why I was trying to go deeper into it by saying, like, there is a category of, obviously it's a big umbrella, but there is a category of people underneath that umbrella that would be considered mentally ill, that are sick. They, all the words that I used to explain it. They're not all mutually exclusive, but they were building on what I was saying.
I think there are people in the world that are a danger to themselves and a danger to others, but I don't think that the state is going to be good at determining who those people are.
What about doctors?
Even doctors are, when they're working through a state apparatus, which is what you're implying, I think, have the ability to... Well, if they're using the state to enforce their decisions, there's just a whole lot of room for corruption there.
Okay.
Okay. Alrighty, that was an intense debate, everyone. I am sweating bullets.
I do want to say one more thing, though, if I can, Corey.
Why not?
Cool. Well, I just, this was a good conversation, the last what we heard, but I do want to emphasize that the killer, has been arrested, but the perpetrator with this whole situation over Charleston is racism, right? Mm-hmm. That, it's not so much relevant towards mental illness, but this was one of those examples that you can't really have a debate with someone who wants to maybe be colorblind about the issue and not say that this wasn't fueled with that intention. And so, mental illness and guns, this is a good conversation to have, but at the same time, this was very outright.
I agree. Definitely worth pointing up right at the end there, because there are a lot of angles to take at this debate, but that's worth remembering. So to finally moving on, we will discuss an interesting poll here that just came out that I'll post in Liberty Meet group chat. Apparently, the U.S. confidence in police is at its lowest in 22 years. So it's a Gallup poll, and I'll just quote here really quickly. It says, while a majority of Americans remain confident in the police, 52% currently express a great deal or quite a lot, whatever that means, of confidence in that institution, tying the low in Gallup's 22-year trend. Confidence has ranged fairly narrowly between 52% and 64% since 1993. But it's at a 22-year low at 52% of Americans expressing a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in institutions. So that means 48, for whatever reason, don't have a lot of confidence in the police. So I think this is a pretty interesting tackle from a number of angles, especially from a libertarian standpoint. So let's go ahead. Katie, do you want to maybe jump us off here?
Sure. I felt like this poll was really interesting. I felt like I think that with all of the different riots and the different occurrences that have been going on, I think that you could expect numbers like this in the new poll. I think that the interesting thing is, though, that it said within the poll that when they broke it down by demographics, that it was Republicans didn't have any changing feeling on it, where the Democrats were more inclined to feel negatively towards the police. And I thought that was really interesting, and it kind of shows where the different angles that the different parties or the typical conservative or liberals take on it. I am admittedly a Fox News viewer. Go ahead and scowl. But you guys know that I am a conservative libertarian. I identify as a Republican. And it was hard during some of these events to watch the angled immediate defense of a cop on these shows. I just found it very interesting, especially because I don't care who is in the right or wrong. I just want to know the truth. So to see that bias, I feel like kind of contributes to that part of the poll. I found that very interesting.
That is interesting. I didn't realize. I guess I didn't read that part of the poll. But I'm not particularly surprised. I'm not sure. Taylor, do you want to jump in here? What do you think of this poll?
I mean, like, surprise, surprise. I thought it was, like, very funny. I mean, I don't think the poll itself is funny, right? Like, the fact that, like, this poll exists. I think it's very funny that people are surprised that this poll exists. I, like, sent it out to a bunch of my friends, and I was like, look, everybody, here's, legitimate proof that this certain amount of individuals no longer trust the police that much. But I don't know. I remember whenever the Eric Johnson incident was going down, I got a huge argument with my parents because they told me that that they believe the law is the law and that individuals who break the law need to be punished, and that just like launched a thousand ships of hate for that conversation between my parents and I specifically. But you know, I like awkwardly have a lot of people on my Facebook that are really big you know, police supporters, and they are constantly posting these Facebook pictures of like a police officer doing good. And I just feel like there's a lot of individuals in this world, a lot of really good cops, probably, maybe, that are just like good people and also happen to be police officers, and then of a lot of bad people that also happen to be police officers. And I just don't really have anything else to say besides that. I think that individuality exists. And I don't know. I think that I won't ever try to be incredibly horrible to a police officer, even though I ideologically disagree with them, unless they try to fuck with me, and then I will lose it. Yeah.
Well, that seems okay. I'm not gonna mess with Taylor anymore, everybody. Kelly, do you want to give us your thoughts on this poll? What do you think?
Yeah, I want to point out to start two specific things that the poll mentioned. The first is that opinion of the police by black people has not changed. The black community in general has had to deal with this shit. Whether or not white America paid attention, they've been dealing with it for a long time. Another thing I noticed about the poll, and actually the article stresses this a lot, is that police support among Democrats has significantly decreased, which to me is unbelievably hypocritical and kind of hilarious because Democrats continue to support measures that keep the police in power, like gun control. You constantly see Democrats supporting the types of laws and the types of institutions that allow police to remain as powerful as they are now. I think the police are an inherently oppressive institution. I don't think that it matters whether or not there are good cops, because no matter how nice a cop may be, they are responsible for enforcing laws against non-violent individuals. You know, the laws like marijuana prohibition, for example. Every single cop is guilty of enforcing marijuana prohibition. There's no such thing as a good cop. So that's kind of what I got from the poll. So.
Ben, your thoughts?
I mean, I guess the temperament that, this poll, it's good to have it officially said through this medium, but at the same time, it's utterly uncontroversial. I mean, we can all have discussions about, just how normal this is, at least especially to libertarians, radicals, leftists. But it's cool to see it said. It kind of reminds me of when white America or people like Tim Wise or Jon Stewart, especially with the last few days, kind of say on their shows what black people have been saying like forever about cops. I mean, you know, this is controversial, right? But the police institution came out of 18th century notions of harassing working class people. Not so much the people who the state is kind of obedient towards, white heterosexual males and those closest to them. So I mean, it's cool to have more evidence towards this obviously very real reality. But I don't know. It's good to just have more conversations about less confidence in cops.
Definitely. That's how I think this is just a really interesting poll. And I mean, it shocked me in that, I mean, if you know, I tend to think or at least I live in somewhat of a libertarian bubble, and then I see polls like this that say 48, you know, there's a 22-year low in confidence in the police, which is just something I wouldn't expect. I'm not sure. So I guess though everyone said their part, so we'll move on here. The next thing I want to talk about, a little different here, is Rand Paul's flat tax proposal. I'm going to go ahead and post the link in the chat, but just briefly, I'll post it in the chat so y'all can read the specifics if you missed it. The plan is basically he's proposing businesses and individual Americans pay a federal flat tax of 14.5% in a plan that would cut the government's tax revenue by more than $2 trillion over 10 years. So what do y'all think of this? I mean, libertarians tend to have really specific views on, you know, what kind of taxes are good, if any. So Taylor, do you want to give us your thoughts on Rand's flat tax proposal?
Not really. I mean, honestly, everything that Rand Paul does just makes me laugh. Like, does it not? Do you not all laugh?
No, I'm a big Rand Paul supporter.
Okay, all right, then Katie, what do you think? I mean, you're obviously probably very ecstatic about this kind of tax thing, so like maybe tell us what do you think?
Well, I read a CNN article, the one that you sent us, about the tax, and I think that the simplification, I don't know, I came to the Liberty Movement about a year and a half ago, and so I have been learning my things by what I'm most interested in at the moment, and economics isn't the area that I'm most into, but I think that it's a really great idea to wipe clean and start over. I think that's something that is, I support it because I think that it's something that is really easy for Americans to understand, which makes him electable, which is one of the things that I'm passionate about. I want to get him elected because I feel like he's the best candidate. But I think that breaking it down and starting over could really give us potential, because even if that's not the right way to, like the 14.5%, it at least opens up a dialogue and that we can have this conversation, because it feels like our taxes are just getting more and more complicated and we need to move somewhere from there.
No, definitely. I definitely think there is something to be said. I mean, it seems far better than any proposal I've seen, even if it's not my ideal. Benjamin, do you want to tell us a bit, and then Kelly?
Sure. Yeah. You know, first off, maybe Katie could say a bit more. I'm really not familiar with it at all. I got a minute to look at it, but initially I began thinking that I did see a moment through Vox.com that they had analysis on it, but that the main beneficiaries are the rich, and I kind of stick to that claim when I think of maybe Herman Cain's 999 plan. A lot of the Republicans that come out saying that, you know, a lot of these tax plans that they have will fix a lot of things, but at the end of the day, I mean, when I'm reverting back to thinking about last election or the one before that, that a lot of those plans had, you know, the top political elite in their best interest. And so, again, I may have to put that Vox.com article in the link in the chat, but I'm kind of sticking to that notion, even if I'm naive again. I didn't look at too much of the specifics of Rand Paul's plan. So.
Right. Yeah, me neither. I kind of have a cursory understanding, but I'm definitely gaining from listening to you all. Kelly, what do you think of this?
Well, as far as plans for taxation go, I think it's really solid. One thing that I think is really great is that the first $50,000 of income for a family of four would not be taxed. Whereas currently, I don't think that's the case. The way taxation works currently is that it's all done by brackets. If you earn a certain range of income, you're taxed at a certain percentage. The richest Americans are paying about 40% in income tax. The poorest are paying 10%. So taking to change it to 14.5 is a massive tax reduction for most Americans. The only bracket that's higher than is the smallest earning income bracket, and I'm assuming that they will not be paying taxes because the first $50,000 is tax-free. What I'm more excited about with this plan is that Rand Paul says that he will balance the budget. So if he could do that effectively, that would mean massive, massive spending cuts across the board. I don't know where that's going to come from. I personally hope it's our entire military budget. But I honestly think that it's a little lofty. I don't really see it going through Congress very successfully, but we'll see what happens. Honestly, like, I think politics are really ineffective, but it would be nice if I didn't have to pay as many taxes and if we cut our entire military. So I'm behind it.
Okay, that definitely makes sense. I tend to agree with that kind of analysis. You know, as far as second best go, this tax plan does seem to be better than most alternatives. And also, I think about the claim that it benefits the rich the most. I'd be interested in that Vox article, Ben, but it seems like the problem with determining that beforehand is because we'd have to work out all the kinks in terms of the deductions and stuff that we removed. So I'm not sure how all that's going to play out in terms of the lowest income bracket seeing their taxes raised, or if they would if it would actually not be raised on that because of all the other changes in the complicated tax code that I'm not smart enough to know. So yeah, I definitely tend to think it's second best. But Ben, if you want to post that that Vox link in the chat, I can get it to we can get it to Liberty Me people. That definitely does sound interesting.
Right now.
So awesome, thank you. So does anyone else have any last comments maybe before we move on? Kelly?
Yeah, currently our tax code is thousands and thousands of pages long. It's the reason that most accountants have their jobs. So it'll be interesting to see if there's any backlash on that front. Simplifying the tax code enough to put it into a 800-word article would be really, really impossible with how the tax code is currently. So this kind of thing that Rand Paul is suggesting is a complete rewrite. It's really dreamy. I don't really think it's realistic. I don't think it's going to happen. But, it's better than what we have now. So, I don't know.
One of the things that I think is really positive about this, kind of like I was saying earlier, is that a lot of times the average American, you can't talk to them about things that, like, about economics because it's just not something that they understand. But this is something that is on such a basic level that I think you could be able to talk to any American and break it down in a way that they would realize how positive, or actually how negative, the way the tax codes are now and how much they affect them.
Definitely, that's definitely a good point I hadn't considered, kind of in terms of communicating our ideas. It's hard to believe that so many millions of Americans were duped into supporting this bizarre tax code that they don't even understand themselves. I don't really know how that happened. But I guess we'll move on. Then we have our final topic today, which is kind of in the libertarian blogosphere a couple weeks ago. I think last week there were still some articles going up. There's been kind of an ongoing debate about women in libertarianism and why there are the amount that there are and why there maybe aren't enough, or how there could be more, or I'm not really sure everyone's taking different angles on it, just exactly what this is, but I'm really interested in this panel's thoughts. Taylor, do you want to maybe go ahead first and tell us what you think of this whole debacle about women and libertarianism?
Well, obviously there's the elephant in the room, the term creepertarian. I mean, I remember joining my local YL chapter, and I would go into the room, and I would never think anything of, the individuals in the room themselves. I always specifically was like, oh, these are people that I think generally alike with. And then somebody pointed out to me that the majority of the individuals were white males in the room. And I looked around, I realized that was kind of true. And then somebody said the word creepertarian. And that was around the time I started to see things a little differently. I don't think that the stereotype itself is the reason why there's such a limited amount of women in the libertarian movement. However, I also don't know if there's specific reasons according to the libertarian movement itself and what it stands for as to why women are less likely to become active in the movements. But all I know is that I've heard the jokes, the rumors, I've seen the stereotypes. That word really kind of opened a lot of doors for me when it comes to evaluating the kinds of individuals who are in the movement itself. Why is something that I would really not like to try and give a reason for. I'm recusing myself basically.
Fair enough. That's perfectly reasonable. No one here is going to force you to do anything. Give us your opinion on that weird topic. I don't know why there's so many creepertarians. I don't know where that came from. I heard it before too. It's pretty common. Ben, what are your thoughts on this specific issue?
Again, first I have to start off saying obviously I'm not a woman, so I wouldn't understand exactly what maybe would prevent some women from otherwise joining maybe SFL or other libertarian-leaning groups. But I can think of it, as a black male, that there are a lot of pressures that come with and intimidations upon coming into a room, maybe that a lot of people just don't look like you. And we live, I mentioned it earlier, we live in a colorblind world that some things maybe from some certain race's experience, another person wouldn't understand and maybe even deny the existence of. So I'm sure sexism is a huge issue within, I've seen it, in the libertarian movement. So I can, here's an elephant in the room too, that this must, I would think, prevent, same way that black people don't join SFL on a huge margin, women of the same notion perhaps. But I'd love to be corrected, or.
All right, yeah, that's fair enough. Definitely recognizing the position you're in terms of analyzing the topic is good to do. Katie, do you want to tell us a bit about your thoughts on women and libertarianism?
Well, for me, I kind of hate when people ask me about this topic because I feel like being a woman in the libertarian movement for me is just the same as being any other kind of person within the movement. I identify as a libertarian, and those principles of libertarianism resonate with me in the similar ways that it resonates with everyone else. I do think that, I do totally agree with Taylor. There are some very off-putting things about dealing with people in politics. A lot of times it can be perceived as guys in politics or whatever, but one of the things that I find that is something that really turns me away from this, and I feel like a lot of times people don't want to put up with this, maybe females, is the constant power struggle that you go through when you're at some kind of a conference or you're speaking to another libertarian. The second that I tell someone that I am into libertarianism, that I like politics, etc., especially when it's between me and a male, it becomes a power struggle where they try to show how intelligent they are. Their position is more valid than yours, and let me tell you why I'm right and you're wrong. That kind of a thing. And that's really off-putting, I think, for all people, but I think specifically for females, I don't want to deal with that. Luckily, I just say, cool, great. I hope you feel super strong and dominant, but I think that's something that turns people away, is that it can be very a power struggle, especially when a lot of the people who, let's face it, we're all, as libertarians, we're all weird people, and there are a lot of us that have poor social skills, and so sometimes there can just be very off-putting moments being a female, and I'm sure you have the same kind of moments as a male. For me, I don't like it being like pointed out that I'm a female libertarian. Like, I'm a libertarian. I want to be equal with everyone.
Sure, definitely. I'd lie if I didn't know what you're talking about in terms of internal struggle within, organizations and stuff. That's definitely a point worth remembering. Kelly, do you want to go ahead and tell us a bit about your point of view on this?
Yeah, I have a lot to say about this topic, but I'll try to keep it concise. I think the biggest problem with libertarians, and actually it's not just libertarians, it's any political movement. Almost every political movement is dominated by white males. Almost every, like, I can't think of a political movement that isn't, unless it's an issue-specific movement. The problem is that when a bunch of white males get together in a room and notice that they're all white males, they immediately turn it into this numbers thing where it's all about acquiring numbers, acquiring minorities, acquiring women. We have to have more women because we're all white males. We have to have more minorities because we're all white males. It's not because we care about women's voices or minorities' voices. It's not because we care about what they might have to say or their unique life experience. It's because we want to have more numbers. And I know that that's been my experience wholeheartedly in the libertarian movement, is almost always when I'm approached as a woman, it's because someone is more interested in having me for demographics reasons than having like my individual voice in the movement. And no one's actually genuinely interested in my experience or what I have to say or why libertarianism affects me and how it affects me. They're more interested in being able to say that I'm in their group. I think when we approach issues like this, when we're addressing problems of not having enough women or enough minorities, we need to focus on listening, not on mansplaining and like telling people why libertarianism is good for them, but genuinely listening to their concerns, listening to where they come from. They might not have the same life experiences as us because they're not white men. And just genuinely being interested in what those people have to say, and then saying, well, that's awesome that that's your experience and that that's what you care about. Let me tell you why liberty is as amazing for me as it could be for you. And can you tell me why you maybe don't see libertarianism as awesomely as I do? So I guess that's my biggest thing, is that we treat it like a numbers thing more than actually listening to people and valuing people for themselves.
Definitely, I think that's another interesting point too. Again, dealing with the politics of political organizations, we should differentiate between reaching out for the sake of reaching out or reaching out because it's just an extension of your general principles, inclusion and tolerance and things like that. So that's really worth mentioning. I haven't really thought about it in that way, but that does happen. I agree. So if no one else, if anybody else has any more comments on this issue, feel free to jump in. If not, I think we're going to move to our last little segment. All right. So as always on SFL Live every week, last few minutes, I ask our guests about the kind of activism and direct action they're engaging in, what they're doing to promote liberty in their lives, and we have a wide variety of guests here, so I'm really excited to see all the different kinds of things that they've been doing lately, even if it's nothing huge. I mean, it's summer, we root our own stuff, but in terms of activism stuff, Benjamin, you're up.
Oh, cool. Well, very, very, very recently I started web development and coding classes with all people of color network called Roots Technology. They meet up on Saturdays in Austin. It's just a it's a once a week thing. But it's really cool to talk with other people of different experiences, and technology as a liberationist front. I mean, people in this group who may find like crypto anarchism or emancipatory technology is really cool. I mean, this is relevant, especially towards marginalized identities, right? Like, so that's been cool. Other than that, I've been a part of the talks of this South Texas Kurdish Solidarity Group, which, at the very beginning of this segment, Corey talked about Rojava and the Syrian Kurds that are fighting against ISIS right now. I mean, I saw a while ago that there was a talk about Liberland or something like that, but I think Rojava is the real, like at this moment, libertarian phenomenon that's going on. I mean, these people are fighting for a feminist front. I mean, so many women on there fighting against ISIS and doing the brave work. And they, for the most part, have an anarchist philosophy. And so we're having an event on July 9th in Austin, and if anybody here is in Texas, we'd love to talk about that. That's the South Texas Kurdish Solidarity Group. Outside of that, I'm just kind of trying to radicalize a lot of the protests here that are revolving around the Black Lives Movement. I make it out every once in a while, but that's kind of where my organizing is right now. Other than that, that's me for the most part.
Right now, I have, in Pennsylvania, we have the medical marijuana law that is currently in the House and is one of the issues that I'm most passionate about. So right now, I have been joining on with a bunch of activism groups in my state and trying to do public activism and contacting a lot of representatives and lobbyists and things of that nature and trying to get this move forward. It is an issue that I am very, very passionate about, so I'm hoping that I can be a part of helping to at least spread the word about it. And for this school year, I am hoping to put together a group of, I want to do something along the lines of like women in public policy, some kind of speaker series at my school. So I'd like to get a female lobbyist, legislative aide, a public official, someone from a think tank, something like that, and bring them in to encourage women to get into this field and like the ins and outs of working in public policy.
Okay, it's me next. I am not really doing that much activism at the moment. I'm a former campus coordinator, so I won't be returning to SFL next year because I have to focus on my school work. But I still write, so I write at C4SS, Center for Stateless Society. I try to write a couple times a month. So, check me out there, I guess. Otherwise, just talking to people, trying to radicalize libertarianism, trying to get more of us over to the dark side with the black flags. So, yeah, that's about it for me right now. But
so currently, well, actually, not currently. It's been going on for about like 4 years now since I started school at Texas State in San Marcos, Texas. But I've been working with a local organization, and we created a petition to create a city ordinance that would remove the added fluoride that our city is putting in our water source. And really recently, actually, the city said that our petition was considered invalid because of like the grounds that the signatures weren't certified, even though they were certified 3 times by the lawyer that we've been working with. But after they considered the petition invalid, we threatened to file a lawsuit to the city, and the city has actually filed a lawsuit to 3 of the individuals who created the petition, so 3 of my really good friends. So that is what I've been dealing with. It is just fucking crazy. So, yeah, I mean, the mass medication of individuals without consent is something that I've been trying to fight in this town for a while now. It's so stupid. I just, like, hate, anyways, sorry, I can't even get the words out of my mouth. So that's what I've been dealing with right now. It's probably my largest project. and something that, you know, I really hate working through the city like this. I hated the idea of having to work through the city at all, but then having the city and watching the city file a lawsuit against individual residents is just fucking blowing my mind. So that's what I've been doing this summer, guys.
Very interesting stuff. Totally. I just want to clarify, Taylor. You said fluoride, right? I mean, is this like a? This is a. I mean, I've heard stuff about fluoride in water, but
it's like a loaded term, right? Because like in the water system that we have right now, there's naturally occurring fluoride that's calcium. Like the compound is like a calcium-related form of fluoride, and then specifically the kind that is being added is this like phosphate derivative from a fertilizer factory. And so like the theory is that the city has been getting paid to put this additional form of fluoride in our water as a means to meet the state like level maximum amount of fluoride that should be in your water system. And so you would think, right, that like if we're residents of the city working through their completely absurd, you know, rules for petitions and city ordinances to go through and be put on a ballot, that they would be a little more accepting to the idea of this petition being created. But for whatever reason, the opposition is so strong with the city to remove the like specific amount that they are adding to our water system, that they would file a lawsuit against individual residents. That is what is creating a lot of aggression right now in the city.
wow, that's really interesting. I haven't heard anything about that, but I'm definitely interested in reading a bit more about that. Good luck with all that stuff that you're doing there. It seems like a good fight. And everybody else, also good luck. I'm always excited to hear about what y'all are doing lately. And that about wraps it up for everybody here. From me and Taylor and Kelly and Katie and Benjamin. Thank you all for joining us. Feel free to come back on SFL Live anytime you want. Your input is definitely appreciated. So thank you, Liberty Me Live audience, for watching us, and everybody who watches us on the recorded version. So thanks a lot, and see you again in 2 weeks. So take care, everybody.
Struck by tragedy earlier this year when a black man was unarmed and murdered by police. In this case, the officer who killed, was it Walter Scott? I hope I'm getting his name. The officer that killed him was they actually brought charges against him, which is extremely rare. And I think that's something we need to think about moving forward, is that this is a community who is constantly on the end of a gun, whether it be from law enforcement or from white supremacists. And to call for taking away their guns, their ability to defend themselves when they know that they can't count on the police, is just really, really disappointing and really stupid. So also we need to stop blaming on mental illness. I know a lot of people, every single time there's a white shooter who kills a bunch of people, the thing that people jump to is not ideology or anything like that. It's that they blame the shooter for having mental illness, and that kind of attitude really hurts the mentally ill, who are disproportionately non-violent. Most violent crime is committed by people who are perfectly sane. So I guess we need to stop blaming the mentally ill, and we need to stop blaming guns, because to ask the black army, or the black, ask the black community to disarm themselves and turn to the police instead for protection is incredibly ignorant. And I guess that's all I really have to say. So Taylor wants to go ahead.
Yeah, Taylor, go ahead.
Okay. Really quickly, I just wanted to clarify, he was 21, he wasn't 19, but I've just been like reading basically anything that I can about this situation, and specifically Dylan and what reinforced his hate crime. But that's probably what I've taken the most out of this event, is the fact that it is a hate crime, and I'm trying to emphasize to a lot of my friends that hate crimes still exist and happen every single day. I think that a lot of people want to believe that we've progressed a lot as a society when it comes to hate crimes and racism, and I wouldn't completely agree with that. I think that we've definitely come far when it, kind of is compared to maybe the 1800s and, even before then. But I think right now we're in this like weird stage of de-development, and I'm just really trying to reinforce and emphasize the fact that this was a hate crime. Hate crimes do exist still to this day, and that there's nothing okay with seeing this as anything else besides a crime full of hate and fueled by racist hate. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I guess the follow-up question then is that I want to ask you all is what kind of solution to this kind of thing? I mean, it seems like we're all on pretty much the same page about similar motivation. Definitely some sort of race-motivated hate crime. So, what kind of? I mean, does this actually call for any kind of widespread solution, or I mean, what do you think we can do to prevent stuff like this? We can go back to Ben. Ben.
Well, first, what Taylor left off on, like it's a time of mourning, a remembrance that the black life maybe isn't, as much as a lot of people want to say all lives matter, right? That black lives particularly matter. And so I don't know, the response is huge, right? People want gun control. There are people like me who are completely for black armament and protestations against the status quo, the view that a lot of people have here. But I can say more about that in a minute. I'd like anyone else to go.
Sure. Okay. Katie, do you want to give us your thoughts on this? Go ahead. And remember to unmute yourself.
Well, I think that the really interesting thing about this situation is that the people of Charleston are doing exactly the opposite of what he wanted to have happen. I see a lot of reports of people coming together, the forgiveness. I don't know if anybody else watched when the families were able to speak to the killer. Just the way that their faith really drove them in such a positive and beautiful way, I think, shows that even though this was an event that was supposed to, he said, like in his manifesto, that he wanted to spark a race war, but to see that it's doing the complete opposite, I think, is showing the resilience of Americans and of people from that area.
Definitely interesting. I haven't seen any of that, but I definitely think it's worth looking into. It's easy to draw a lot of negatives from this whole thing, but you want to look for a silver lining. Kelly, do you want to go ahead and tell us your thoughts on this whole thing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like Katie said, the response by the community has been really great. Charleston was
Levy, who is a rising senior at Tulane University in New Orleans, and also an advisor at the Center for Stateless Society. She's an anarcho-feminist former Students for Liberty campus coordinator. So to jump right into the conversation, then the thing that seems to be on everyone's minds lately is the Charleston shooting. In case any of you have been living under a rock lately, basically this I think 19-year-old person, I forget his name, Dylan Roof, there it is. He shot and killed 9 people inside the historic Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church near the heart of Charleston's tourist district. And a lot of different conversations have been spiraling out of this here. There's a lot of clamoring for gun control. The conversations entwined here with a lot of the calls to remove Confederate flag and other symbols from the Confederacy from public buildings in the South because of some pictures of him with the Confederate flag that were found after the shooting. So I guess I'll just open it up for discussion on whatever angle you all want to take on this. Ben, do you want to maybe go ahead and tell us what you think about this whole Charleston shooting mess?
I mean, there are a lot of elements to it, right? It's undeniable, no matter how many people from the South and other maybe deny that this was race motivated. It's undeniable at this point that, Dylan wanted to start some sort of race war, even by his own words. The manifesto of his own website, which, certain U.S. networks have found exactly what was said in his manifesto and just what he hoped to aspire with this. And so I guess, it's a lot of feelings from a lot of people, black people of color.
Hey everyone, this is SFL Live, our third episode now, and we're joined by four wonderful student activists who tell us a little bit about their opinions on current events and some of the activism they've been doing. So just to briefly talk about SFL a bit, Students for Liberty is an international nonprofit organization. It's dedicated to providing resources to college students across the globe to promote liberty on their campuses, to promote social liberty, economic freedom, and academic freedom. So to get right into the talks, I guess, I will introduce our guests, and I have their bios right here, if I can find them. Here we go. So first we have Benjamin Blow. He's a former SFL organizer from South Texas. He's a black anarchist, radical womanist, and an undergraduate studying anthropology in San Antonio. Some of his current interests and organizing efforts include combating racial violence, emancipatory technologies employed by marginalized identities, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing this, Ben. Rahovian? Sorry, if you want to unmute yourself and correct me.
Rojavin.
Rojavin Social Revolution, a worker-owner cooperative. So we'll probably hear more a little bit about that towards the end of the show, too. We also have Taylor Svala, who is a political science student at Texas State University, where they work for their school's local radio station. They're dedicated to the removal of government coercion and are currently beating a fast food addiction, so we should all pray for Taylor. Katie Moyer is a senior at Millersville University in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. She's going to graduate in December and plans to work on a 2016 GOP presidential campaign. She is a senior campus coordinator with Students for Liberty, and her political interests include domestic issues, such as medical marijuana, the national debt, the Constitution, and reforming the Republican Party. And last but not least, we have Kelly